Tuesday afternoon in Chicago, began like any other for Dolores Jordan. At 84 years old, the Jordan family matriarch maintained her sacred routine. Weekly visits to the bank to check the accounts of the charitable foundation she had administered since Michael retired in 2003. It was a tradition she had preserved for more than 2 decades, a way to stay active and useful even at 84. The National Bank of Chicago buzzed with typical afternoon activity. Dolores waited patiently in the priority line when she noticed the young employee behind the counter watching her with a disdainful smile. She was a girl of about 25 years old, platinum blonde hair, and extravagantly decorated nails, who chewed gum deliberately noisily. "Next!" shouted the employee, and Dolores approached the window with her modest purse and foundation papers neatly arranged in a leather folder worn by time. "Good afternoon, dear. I need to check the statement for the Jordan Foundation for Underprivileged Youth," said Dolores, with her gentle voice and warm smile. The employee, whose badge identified her as Brittany Santos, barely looked up from the documents. "ID," she said curtly. Dolores handed over her documents, noting how the young woman frowned when reading the name. "Jordan, Jordan," murmured Brittany, as if trying to remember something. "Ah, it's you, the mother of that retired basketball player." "Yes, Michael is my son," replied Dolores with discreet pride. That's when Brittany raised her gaze with an expression that mixed disdain and cruel amusement. "Interesting. A foundation for underprivileged youth." She examined the papers with exaggerated slowness. "Tell me something, ma'am." The pause was deliberate and venomous. "With what money exactly are you going to pay for these donations? Because from what I see here, this account hasn't had any movement in months." The comment echoed through the bank lobby. Other people in line began to pay attention. Whispers spread. Dolores felt blood rush to her face. Not from humiliation, but from the pure audacity of the young woman. "Excuse me?" asked Dolores, maintaining the composure that decades of public life had taught her. Brittany leaned over the counter with a malicious smile. "Look, Grandma, you don't need to pretend with me. Everyone knows that you people, like this, live on appearances. Your son was famous, but that was more than 20 years ago. I bet you're broke now, and this foundation is just a facade to get easy money." The silence that followed was deafening. Customers stopped to observe the scene. Security guards approached, sensing the tension. Dolores breathed deeply, her hands trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from an indignation she hadn't felt in decades. "Young lady," she said with a voice that carried decades of dignity and strength, "I imagine you have no idea who you're talking to." Brittany laughed loudly, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the bank. "I know very well, with the mother of an ex-player who thinks he's still important. But here inside the bank, you're just another elderly customer. And one who apparently is trying to move money from an account without funds." It was at that moment that something changed in the air. A medium-statured, bald man, wearing an impeccable suit, approached the window. At 62 years old, Michael Jordan still maintained the magnetic presence that had made him a legend, and immediately several people recognized him. Whispers began. "It's him. It's Michael Jordan." Michael had arrived at the bank for a meeting about family investments. But seeing the crowd gathered around his mother's window, he approached to check what was happening. "Mom," he said, placing a protective hand on Dolores's shoulder. Brittany immediately paled. The gum stopped being chewed. Her eyes widened as she recognized the man who was on magazine covers, documentaries, and who was considered the greatest basketball player of all time. "Michael, dear," said Dolores calmly, "I was just making the foundation transaction, but it seems this young lady has some doubts about our financial capacity." Michael raised an eyebrow, that intense look that intimidated opponents on the courts now focused entirely on the employee. Even at 62, retired for more than 20 years, his presence was intimidating. "Doubts?" Brittany stammered. "Mr. Jordan, I didn't know that she was my mother." Michael interrupted, his voice low but loaded with authority. Or didn't you know that an 4-year-old black woman could have resources to help underprivileged youth? The silence became oppressive. Other bank employees approached, including the general manager, who immediately recognized the disastrous situation unfolding. "Mr. Jordan," the manager began, "is there a problem we can resolve?" Michael kept his eyes fixed on Brittany. "My mother came to make a simple transaction for the foundation that our family has maintained for more than 2 decades. A foundation that has already donated more than $100 million to underprivileged youth. And your employee thought it appropriate to publicly question our financial credibility." Brittany was visibly trembling now. "Mr. Jordan, I apologize. I didn't." "Didn't what?" Michael took a step forward, his bald head gleaming under the bank's fluorescent lights. "Didn't think? Didn't care? Or didn't expect that a black woman would have resources?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. The entire bank was in absolute silence, as if witnessing a historic moment, which, in a way, was happening. Dolores touched her son's arm. "Michael, we don't need to." "No, Mom." "Yes, we do." He turned to the manager. "I want to speak with the president of this bank. Now." While this was happening, a figure watched the scene from afar, near the bank entrance. It was a woman of about 48 years old, elegantly dressed, who had stopped upon recognizing the familiar voice. Her eyes filled with tears seeing Michael defend his mother with the same passion she remembered from decades ago. Carmen Rodriguez had worked at that same bank 25 years earlier, when she met Michael Jordan in 1998. Now, as vice president of a competing institution, she was there for a meeting that had just been canceled. Destiny, it seemed, had other plans. She watched the scene unfold, remembering the 5-year-old young man she had known, still arrogant after being a 3-time champion, but with a heart that few knew. The bald man defending his mother was different from the one she had left behind. There was maturity in his fury, wisdom in his indignation. Carmen knew she should leave, avoid the reunion she feared and desired for more than 2 decades. But something kept her there, watching the man she still loved, and who had no idea of the secret she had carried since 1999, a secret that would change everything. The commotion continued at the window. Brittany had been quickly replaced by a senior manager, who treated Dolores with due reverence. Michael signed papers that would significantly increase the foundation's donations, transforming the embarrassment into a victory for the charity. But while this was happening, Carmen made the decision she had avoided for 25 years. She began walking toward them, her heart beating like it hadn't since the last time they were together. The employee who had humiliated Dolores Jordan was about to be fired. The bank was about to make a substantial corporate donation as an apology, and Michael Jordan was about to reunite with the only woman he had truly loved. None of them knew that this day would change their lives forever. Carmen stopped a few meters away, words stuck in her throat like stones. 25 years of speeches mentally rehearsed, letters never sent, phone calls never made, and now that the moment had arrived, she was mute. Michael was finishing signing the documents when Dolores noticed the woman standing near them. There was something familiar about that elegant figure, the way she held her purse, the tilt of her head. "Michael," murmured Dolores, discreetly touching her son's arm. "That woman there." He turned, following his mother's gaze. Time stopped. Carmen Rodriguez. At 48 years old, she maintained the same natural elegance that had captivated him when he was 35 and she was 23. Her hair, now with strategically distributed silver strands, was pulled back in a low bun that highlighted her dark eyes. Eyes that always made him forget where he was. "Carmen." Michael's voice came out as an incredulous whisper. She approached slowly, as if walking through a dream. "Hello, Michael." The simplicity of the words contrasted with the complexity of the moment. Around them, the bank continued functioning. But for Michael, Carmen, and Dolores, the world had reduced to an intimate circle of memories and unresolved emotions. "My God," said Dolores, finally recognizing the woman. Carmen! How long it's been! Carmen smiled, that genuine smile that Michael remembered causing butterflies in his stomach when he was 35. Mrs. Dolores, you look radiant. They embraced warmly. For years after the breakup, Dolores had asked about Carmen, lamenting the loss of the young woman she considered perfect for her son. Michael always changed the subject. What are you doing here? Asked Michael, still processing the surrealism of the situation. I work here. Well, not here, exactly. At the Central Bank of Illinois, a few blocks away. I had a meeting that was canceled and... She hesitated. I heard the commotion and came to see if I could help. God. Help? Michael arched an eyebrow, a gesture that at 62 had become more pronounced. Carmen breathed deeply. I recognized your voice. Even after all these years, there was a pause loaded with meaning. Some things never change. Dolores observed the interaction between the two with attentive eyes. An experienced mother, she perceived the undercurrents of emotion flowing between them. She decided to take the initiative. Carmen, dear, how long has it been since we've seen each other? It must be. What? More than 20 years? 25, replied Carmen automatically, then blushed, realizing how specific she had been. Michael noticed. Of course, he noticed. Carmen had always been terrible at hiding her feelings, a transparency that was both charming and frustrating. Would you two like to talk somewhere more private? Suggested Michael, indicating a small VIP lounge in the bank. After that embarrassing situation, I think my mother deserves special treatment. The bank manager, still trying to remedy the incident with Brittany, immediately offered the private space. Within a few minutes, the three were seated in leather armchairs, with coffee being served by a discreet employee. Carmen studied Michael while he talked with his mother. The completely bald head he had embraced with dignity. The lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter and worries, accumulated over 62 years. The confident posture that had become more refined with age and maturity. He was more interesting now than at 35, when they separated. So, said Dolores, breaking a silence that threatened to become uncomfortable. Carmen, tell us about your life. Did you marry? Children? The question hit Carmen like a punch to the stomach. She had prepared for many possible questions, but this one still caught her off guard. She began, then stopped. Michael was watching her intently. I didn't marry. No. What a shame, said Dolores sincerely. A beautiful and intelligent woman like you. Mom, interrupted Michael softly, recognizing Carmen's discomfort. No, it's okay, said Carmen quickly. It's a normal question. I had relationships, but nothing serious. It wasn't entirely true. There had been James, the lawyer she lived with for 5 years, and Roberto, the doctor, who almost convinced her to move to Seattle. But none of them could fill the void that Michael had left. None of them knew the secret she carried. And you, Michael? Asked Carmen, changing focus. Michael smiled, the first genuine smile since the incident at the window. Yvette is well. The twins are 11 now, full of energy. Victoria wants to be a lawyer. Isabel wants to be a singer. His expression became softer when talking about family. And Jeffrey is 37. Marcus is 35. Jasmine, 33. 3 grandchildren already. Carmen smiled, but felt a stab in her chest. She had always known, through tabloids and reports, about Michael's marriages, about his children, about his happy life with Yvette Prieto. Part of her wondered what it would be like if things had been different. It must be wonderful to have such a large family, she said sincerely. It is, Michael agreed. Especially now that I'm older. At 62, you appreciate every moment with them in a way you didn't appreciate at 30. And basketball? Do you miss it? Sometimes. But now, I prefer watching my children and grandchildren play. It's a different joy. Carmen nodded, but felt tears threatening. You always said you would be an incredible father. You remember that? I remember a lot of things. The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken memories. Dolores, a wise woman, realized she was witnessing something significant. You know, she said, standing up. I'll let you two talk. I have some shopping to do. Before they could protest, she added, Carmen, it would be wonderful if you came to dinner at home someday. Michael can give you my phone number. And with that, she left, leaving them alone for the first time in more than 2 decades. Carmen laughed nervously. Your mother was always as subtle as a hammer. Some things never change, echoed Michael, repeating her words from earlier. They looked at each other for a moment, the weight of years and unspoken words hovering between them. Carmen, Michael began, why are you really here? I mean, in Chicago. You always said you would leave for New York or Los Angeles when you finished your MBA. Carmen looked at her hands. Plans changed. Why? It was the question she feared. The question that would lead directly to the secret she had kept for 25 years. Life happened, Michael. We can't always do what we plan. One. That's a very vague answer for you. The Carmen I knew was direct as an arrow. She raised her gaze, meeting his eyes. The Carmen you knew was 23 years old and thought the world was waiting for her. And now I know that sometimes the world has other plans. Michael leaned forward. What kind of plans? Michael. What kind of plans? Carmen felt her heart accelerate. She was getting dangerously close to territory she had promised herself to avoid. But looking at Michael, seeing him like this, mature, and still devastatingly attractive, even at 62, made all her defenses tremble. Michael, she said softly. What secrets? The question echoed in the silent lounge. Carmen knew she had reached a point of no return. She could lie, deflect, make up an excuse, and leave his life again. Or she could, after 25 years, finally tell the truth. But before she could answer, Michael's phone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. Sorry, I need to answer this. It's Yvette. Carmen felt an irrational pang of jealousy as Michael spoke lovingly with his wife about some issue related to the twins. When he hung up, the question was still in his eyes. Carmen, what aren't you telling me? She breathed deeply. 25 years of silence were about to come to an end. Michael, if I told you something. The intensity in her voice made something turn in Michael's stomach. What kind of something? The kind that explains why I never left Chicago. Why I never married. Why? Her voice trembled. Why? I could never forget you. Michael felt the world tilt slightly. Carmen. I have a son, Michael. The words came out as a whisper, but echoed in the lounge like a scream. Michael blinked, processing. A son? A 24-year-old son. The math was too simple, too terrible. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. Carmen. His voice was hoarse. Why are you telling me this? She looked into his eyes, tears finally escaping. Because 9 months after we broke up, I had a baby. And during all these years, he asked about his father, and I never knew what to say. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael felt like he was falling, as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Are you saying that? I'm saying that you have a son you never knew existed. A son who is now 24 years old, who graduated from university, who works, and who wonders why his father never wanted to know him. Michael Jordan, the man who had faced the worst pressures in professional sports, who had overcome devastating defeats and merciless criticism, was completely speechless. Carmen continued, words pouring out like a dam that had finally burst. When I discovered I was pregnant, you had already married Juanita. The wedding photos were in all the magazines. You looked so happy, your personal life finally stabilizing after the first 3 championship. I thought a child would just be a complication. I thought it would be selfish of me to interfere. Carmen. Michael finally managed to speak, but she continued. So I raised our son alone. I named him David. David Rodriguez Jordan. Yes, I kept your surname as his middle name. He has your height, Michael. He has your eyes. And he has this determination. This obsession with excellence. That is completely yours. Michael was trembling. Literally, trembling. 24 years, he murmured. 24 years and you never told me. How could I? You were newly married, building a family, at the height of your career. I didn't want to be just another problem. Another complication in your life that was already so public. A problem. Michael exploded, his voice echoing in the lounge, making Carmen flinch. Carmen, you're talking about my son. I know, she shouted back, years of guilt and pain finally overflowing. Do you think it was easy? Do you think I didn't die wanting to call? To show up at your door? But you had your life, your family, and I. I just wanted him to grow up normal, without being Michael Jordan's bastard son. Michael stood up, his bald head reflecting the ceiling lights as he walked to the window. Outside, Chicago pulsed with normal life. People living their ordinary lives, unaware that inside that bank, an entire universe was being rewritten. Where is he now? Asked Michael, without turning around. He works as an investment analyst here in Chicago. He graduated in economics from Northwestern. Does he know? Carmen hesitated. He knows you're his father. I never lied about that. But I said you didn't know about him, and that I thought it was better that way. Michael turned slowly. Does he want to meet me? Michael. Carmen also stood up. He's dreamed about it for years, but he's afraid you'll reject him. He's afraid he's not interesting enough for someone like you. Not interesting enough? Michael laughed bitterly. Carmen, I lost 24 years of his life. 24 years of birthdays, graduations, basketball games, first jobs, of everything. Everything. Tears now ran freely down Carmen's face. I know. God, how I know. But I thought I was doing the right thing. Michael came back close to her. You're right. Completely right. But I was 23 years old, scared, and in love with a man who was marrying someone else. I never stopped loving you. The words came out before Michael could stop them. Carmen stopped crying, looking at him in surprise. What? You want to know why it took me so long to marry Yvette, even after the divorce from Juanita? Because I compared all of them to you. Because none of them made me laugh like you, challenged me like you, knew me like you. Carmen felt the world spin. Michael, you're married. You have a beautiful family. I do. And I love my family. But that doesn't change the fact that for years I wondered, what if? What if you hadn't disappeared from my life? What if I had fought harder for us? Michael, stop. Carmen raised her hand. You're 62 years old. You have a wonderful wife, young daughters. I didn't come here to complicate your life. Then why did you come to tell me about David? Carmen was silent for a long moment. Because he deserves to know his father. And you deserve to know you have another son. Michael sat heavily. A 24-year-old son. He stopped, processing. Yes. And I didn't even know he existed. Michael. Carmen sat beside him, carefully maintaining distance. I made a terrible mistake. I deprived you both of knowing each other for 24 years. I can't undo that. But I can try to fix it now. Michael looked at her, and for a moment, Carmen saw the young man she had loved, behind the maturity and bald head. What is he like? Asked Michael softly. Carmen smiled through tears. He's kind like you were to me when no one was looking. He's ambitious like you, but without the arrogance. He's intelligent, graduated with honors. And, she hesitated. And he has your smile, Michael. That smile you only showed when you were truly happy. Michael closed his eyes. I want to meet him. He'll want to meet you too. When? When you're ready. Michael opened his eyes. I'm ready now. I've been ready for 24 years. I just didn't know it. Carmen nodded. I'll call him. As she picked up her phone, Michael realized his life had just changed completely. At home, Yvette and the twins were waiting for him for dinner. Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine had their own families, their own lives. And now there was David, a 24-year-old son who grew up without a father, who wondered about his origin, who carried the Jordan surname without ever having known the man who made it famous. Outside, Chicago continued its normal life, unaware that inside that bank, Michael Jordan had just discovered he was a father for the 6th time. David Rodriguez Jordan was in his apartment in Lincoln Park, finishing some investment reports when his phone rang. Seeing his mother's name on the screen always made him smile. Carmen called religiously on Fridays to know about his week. Hi, Mom. A bit early for the weekly call, don't you think? David, honey, can you sit down? I need to tell you something important. The serious tone in her voice immediately alerted him. David Rodriguez Jordan, at 24 years old, had inherited more than just the 6'4" height and penetrating eyes from Michael Jordan. He had also inherited the sharp intuition for when something important was happening. Mom, what happened? Are you okay? I'm fine, but, David, your father knows about you now. David felt as if the world had stopped spinning. For 24 years, he had lived with the story that his father, Michael Jordan, didn't know of his existence. It was information he carried as a constant weight and curiosity. What do you mean he knows? Did you tell him? We met by chance today. It was unexpected. David stood up from the table, starting to pace around the apartment. And? How did he react? He wants to meet you. The words hung in the air. David had dreamed of this moment since childhood. But now that it was happening, he felt completely unprepared. He wants to meet me? Michael Jordan wants to meet me? Carmen laughed through the tears David could hear in her voice. David, you're his son. Of course he wants to meet you. Mom, he's not just my father. He's Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time. What am I going to say to him? You're going to be yourself. The incredible man I raised. David stopped in front of the hallway mirror. Looking at his reflection, he could see features he had always wondered where they came from. The strong jawline, the shape of his eyes, the naturally confident posture. Now he knew. When? He wants to meet you as soon as possible. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow? David felt panic rising. Mom, I'm not ready for tomorrow. David, you've waited your whole life for this. One more day won't make a difference in preparation, but it might make a difference in anxiety. Rund. 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 She was right, as always. David breathed deeply. Where? How? How about lunch? Somewhere quiet. I can organize everything. After hanging up, David stood in the middle of the living room, trying to process that in less than 24 hours, he would meet the man he had idolized since childhood, whom he had studied intensively, whose moves he had memorized, whose interviews he had watched countless times, and who, by chance, was his father. The next day, Michael woke up in his mansion in Highland Park earlier than normal. At 62 years old, he rarely felt the nervous anxiety he was experiencing. He had spent the previous night explaining to Yvette about David, a conversation that was surprisingly well received. Another son? Yvette had asked, holding his hands. Michael, this is wonderful. Wonderful? Yvette, I lost 24 years of his life. Then don't lose another day. His wife, always practical and wise, had embraced him. The girls will be excited about the idea of having another big brother. Victoria and Ysabel, the 11-year-old twins, had reacted with typical age curiosity. "Daddy, does he play basketball like you?" Victoria had asked. "Will he teach us moves?" Yisabel wanted to know. Now, getting ready for lunch. At 62, he stayed in shape, but the completely bald head and wrinkles around his eyes reminded him that much time had passed since he was the 5-year-old who dated Carmen. What kind of man did his son expect to find? What kind of father could he be to someone 24 years old? They met at Gibson's, a discreet restaurant in downtown Chicago. Carmen arrived first, clearly nervous, constantly checking her phone. Michael arrived next, wearing sunglasses and a cap in a futile attempt to go unnoticed. "How are you?" asked Carmen when he sat down. "Terrified," admitted Michael. "And you?" "The same." They kept watching the entrance, each car that stopped making their hearts accelerate. Michael felt the air leave his lungs. David Rodriguez Jordan was tall like him, but with the natural elegance of youth. He wore a well-cut navy blue suit that highlighted his athletic build. His dark hair was well-groomed, and when he looked around the restaurant searching for them, Michael saw his own eyes looking back. "My God," murmured Michael. "It's like looking in a mirror from 40 years ago." Carmen waved discreetly, and David headed to the table. With each step, Michael noticed more similarities. The way he walked, the confident posture, the way he observed the environment before approaching. "Hello," said David when he reached the table, his voice surprisingly firm considering he was visibly nervous. Michael stood up automatically. For a moment, the two men stood there, evaluating each other. "David," said Michael finally. "I am." "I know who you are," David interrupted softly. Then, with a smile that was identical to Michael's, he added, "Hi, Dad." The word hit Michael like lightning. He had been called Dad thousands of times by Jeffrey, Marcus, Jasmine, and the twins. But hearing that word from David, seeing his own features in a young face, knowing this man had grown up without him. "Hi, son," Michael managed to reply, his voice choked. They sat down, and for a few minutes, just looked at each other. Carmen did her best to facilitate conversation, but it was clear that father and son were absorbed in each other. "You look like me when I was your age," said Michael finally. "That's what everyone says. Although I never had photos to compare." The phrase was said without bitterness, but Michael felt its weight. "David, I'm sorry. For all the years I lost, for not being present." "Dad," David interrupted, and Michael noticed how naturally the word came from his lips. "My mother explained everything to me yesterday. You didn't know. There's nothing to apologize for. There is. Even if I didn't know, you grew up without a father. That's something I should have prevented." David studied Michael for a moment. "Can I be honest? Please." Growing up being Michael Jordan's son, even secretly, was complicated. But my mother did an incredible job. I never felt without love or support. "But you missed me?" David hesitated, then nodded. "Every day." The silence that followed was loaded with emotion. Carmen chose not to interfere, letting father and son navigate these unknown waters. "Tell me about yourself," said Michael. "Your life, your dreams, your passions." David smiled, relaxing for the first time since arriving. "Well, I graduated in economics from Northwestern. I work as an investment analyst. And..." He hesitated. "I play basketball. On weekends. Are you good?" "I'm decent. I'm not you, but I do well." Michael laughed. "Son, I wouldn't expect you to be me. I want you to be you." "And about professional basketball? Did you ever consider it?" David shook his head. "I'm good, but I'm not exceptional. Besides, I always wanted to make my own name, not live in the shadow of, well, your shadow." Michael nodded respectfully. "I understand perfectly." As lunch progressed, father and son discovered they had more in common than just physical appearance. Both were competitive to obsession. Both had an almost compulsive need for excellence. Both used humor as a defense mechanism. My mother always said I had your intensity, said David. And was she right? Well, I've been fired from a job for being excessively demanding with the team. Michael burst out laughing. Definitely, my son. 2 hours later, when Carmen discreetly suggested they might wrap up lunch, neither wanted to leave. David, said Michael, standing from the table. David blinked. They know about me? They do now. And they're eager to meet you. Really? They don't feel threatened or resentful? David, your family. Family supports each other. Doesn't resent. David looked at Carmen, who nodded encouragingly. I would love that very much, he said. How about dinner at home tomorrow? I can introduce you to Yvette and the twins. Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine can come too, if they're free. Are you sure? Don't you want time to process all this first? Michael placed his hand on David's shoulder, a gesture that seemed completely natural to both. Son, I lost 24 years. I'm not going to lose another day. When they said goodbye in the parking lot, David and Michael hugged for the first time. It was a hug between strangers who shared blood, of a father and son trying to rebuild 2 lost decades in a few seconds of physical contact. Dad, said David as they separated, thank you for wanting to know me. David, replied Michael, thank you for giving me this chance. As Michael drove home, Carmen and David went to her apartment. Mother and son needed to talk about what had just happened. So? Asked Carmen, as soon as they entered the apartment. Mom, said David, throwing himself on the couch with a huge smile. I just had lunch with Michael Jordan, and he's my dad. How was it? It was surreal, incredible, scary. David paused. He's exactly like I expected, and completely different at the same time. How so? He's clearly Michael Jordan. All that intensity, that presence. But he's also just a dad, wanting to know his son. Carmen smiled. And you? How do you feel? David was silent for a moment. I feel like a part of me that was always missing finally came home. That night, Michael returned to Highland Park and told Yvette and the twins about the lunch. Victoria and Isabel were especially excited about the idea of meeting their new big brother. Is he handsome like you, Daddy? Asked Isabel. More handsome, replied Michael, making Yvette laugh. When are we going to meet him? Wanted to know Victoria. Tomorrow at dinner if you want. We want, shouted both in unison. Later that night, Michael called Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine, telling them about David and inviting them to dinner the next day. The reactions were varied. Jeffrey was curious and excited. Marcus a bit skeptical, but willing to meet him, and Jasmine immediately maternal, wanting to know if David was okay and if he needed anything. Dad, said Jeffrey during the call, how do you feel about all this? Michael thought for a moment. I feel like I won the lottery and lost 24 years at the same time. And now? Now I'm going to try to make up for lost time. The next morning, David woke up in his apartment with a mixture of anxiety and excitement he hadn't felt since graduation. In a few hours, he would meet the siblings he never knew he had. The family he had always wanted was finally within reach. Dinner was scheduled for 7 in the evening, but David arrived at Michael's mansion in Highland Park at 6:45. Driving through the tree-lined streets and imposing houses, he realized he was about to enter a world he had always observed from afar through magazines and reports. The house was impressive. A colonial-style mansion with meticulously maintained gardens. David parked his modest Honda Civic next to a Mercedes and a Range Rover, feeling momentarily intimidated. Michael opened the door before David could even ring the bell. You're early, observed Michael with a smile. Nervous? A little, admitted David. I'm about to meet Michael Jordan's children. This isn't exactly a normal situation. David. Michael placed his hand on his son's shoulder. You're not meeting Michael Jordan's children. You're meeting your brothers and sisters. Before David could respond, 2 11-year-old girls appeared running down the stairs, clearly having ignored instructions to wait in the living room. Daddy, he's here, shouted one of them. Victoria, Isabel, "Where are your manners?" came a female voice from inside the house. Yvette Jordan appeared in the hallway, and David immediately understood why Michael had fallen in love with her. At 45, she was elegant and warm, with a smile that put people at ease instantly. "David," she said, approaching with open arms. "Welcome to the family." Her hug was warm and genuine, and David immediately felt accepted. "These are Victoria and Isabel," said Michael, indicating the twins who were watching David with intense curiosity. "Are you really our brother?" asked Victoria. "Victoria!" scolded Yvette. "No, it's okay," said David, crouching to get to the girl's height. "Yes, I am. Half-brother. Technically." "Do you play basketball?" asked Isabel. "Yes, I do. Are you better than Dad was?" David laughed. "Nobody was better than your dad." Michael smiled, watching the interaction. "Let's go inside?" Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine should arrive any moment. The living room was spacious and comfortable, tastefully decorated, but without excessive ostentation. David noticed several family photos scattered around. Michael, with his older children. Wedding photos with Yvette. The twins, at various ages. "There will be photos of you here too," said Yvette, following his gaze. "We just need to take some first." Before David could respond, the doorbell rang. "That must be them," said Michael, heading to the door. David breathed deeply. He was about to meet Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine Jordan, people he had read about in magazines, seen in interviews, but who now discovered were his family. Jeffrey entered first. At 37, he was tall like his father, but with still abundant hair and a more relaxed presence than Michael's characteristic intensity. "So you're the famous David," said Jeffrey with a smile, approaching to greet him. "I must say, the resemblance to Dad is scary." "Jeffrey," David greeted back, relieved by the naturalness of the encounter. Marcus Jr. entered next. At 35, he had a different energy, more reserved than Jeffrey, but with eyes that carefully evaluated everything. "David," he said, extending his hand. "Welcome to the craziness that is being Michael Jordan's son." "Thank you," laughed David. "I'm still processing all this. You'll get used to it, or go crazy trying, one of the two." Finally, Jasmine entered. At 33, she had her mother's warm presence, but with her father's intense eyes. She went directly to David and hugged him. "Hi, brother," she said simply. "I'm sorry you grew up without us." David felt his eyes fill with tears. "Thank you." Dinner was surprisingly natural. Yvette had prepared a menu that included everyone's favorite foods, and conversation flowed easily. David discovered that Jeffrey worked with investments, a common area, that Marcus Jr. was involved in clothing, retail, and that Jasmine was an executive at a sports marketing company. "So," said Jeffrey at one point, "what did you think when you discovered your father was Michael Jordan?" "Honestly?" David put his fork on his plate. "Relief." "Relief?" asked Jasmine. "I always knew my father was someone special, from the way my mother talked about him. But I never knew who. Discovering it was someone I already admired. It was like finally understanding where a part of me came from." "And now," asked Marcus Jr., "how is it to have the most competitive of fathers?" David looked at Michael, who was cutting his meat with surgical precision. "Intimidating, but also exciting." "You guys will get along well," said Victoria suddenly, making everyone look at her. "David has the same look Dad has when he's concentrating." "She's right," observed Isabel. "Look how he eats. Same methodical way as Dad." Michael laughed. "Girls, you're being very observant today. It's because we're studying our new brother," explained Victoria seriously. After the main course, while Yvette and the twins prepared dessert, the 5 siblings gathered in the living room. David felt strangely normal sitting among people he had known for hours, but who felt like family. "Can I ask something?" said Marcus Jr. "Sure." "Are you angry? At Dad? At the situation? At the lost years?" David considered the question carefully. No. I have. Sadness, maybe? For the lost opportunity. But anger? No. Nobody did anything out of malice. That's very mature of you, said Jasmine. Well, I had 24 years to process the situation. You've had 2 days. Jeffrey laughed. Good point. And about the future? Asked Marcus Jr. What do you expect from this situation? David looked out the window, seeing Michael in the garden playing with the twins. Honestly, I just want to know my family. I don't expect it to be like we grew up together. But maybe we can build something new. Dad would like that, said Jasmine softly. He was really devastated yesterday when he told us about you. Not because you exist, but because he lost so much time. Is he a good father? Asked David, a question that carried the weight of a lifetime of curiosity. The best, replied all three in unison. Intense, added Jeffrey. Demanding, added Marcus Jr. But completely dedicated, finished Jasmine. When Michael came back inside, he found his 4 oldest children talking as if they were longtime friends. How are things here? He asked. Good, said David, looking around the group. Very good. Later that night, when the others had left and the twins had gone to bed, Michael, Yvette, and David sat on the terrace, watching Lake Michigan under the moonlight. How was it? Asked Michael. Better than I expected, admitted David. Your family is incredible. Your family, corrected Yvette. David nodded, still processing the reality that he now had 6 siblings, a stepmother, and the father he had dreamed of his whole life. Michael, he said finally, can I ask something personal? Everything. Do you regret anything? In your life? In your career? Michael considered the question. Many things. I regret not fighting harder for your mother when we were young. I regret trusting advisors who made decisions for me. I regret losing the first 24 years of your life. And if you could change something, I would have gone after Carmen when she said she needed space. I would have asked why, instead of just accepting. David nodded. I can understand that. And you? Do you regret anything? David thought. Not having tried to find you when I got older. I was always afraid of being rejected. But maybe I should have taken the risk. Well, said Michael, now we're here. The past can't be changed. But the future is ours. What would you like for the future? Asked David. Michael looked at his son. This young man who was at the same time a stranger and part of himself. I want to truly know you. Your dreams, your fears, your passions. I want to be present for the important moments to come. I want to be your father, not just biologically, but in all the ways that matter. And I, said David, want to learn to be your son. Yvette smiled, watching father and son try to navigate this unknown territory. You two will figure this out together. When David finally prepared to leave that night, Michael accompanied him to his car. David, he said, I know all this is very new and may be overwhelming. There's no pressure to feel like family immediately. We'll go at your pace. Thank you, said David. But honestly, I already feel more at home here than I've ever felt anywhere. Really? Really. It's strange. But it's like a part of me that was always searching for something finally found it. Michael hugged his son again, and this time the hug lasted longer, full of possibilities and promises for the future. Will we see each other soon? Asked Michael. You can bet on it, replied David. After all, I still need to learn about this Jordan intensity that everyone mentions. Michael laughed. Be careful what you wish for, son. You might end up getting it. As David drove back to his apartment, he couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just David Rodriguez. He was David Rodriguez Jordan, son of Michael Jordan, brother of Jeffrey, Marcus Jr., Jasmine, Victoria, and Isabel. He was part of a family. And despite all the lost years, all the missed opportunities, all the unanswered questions he had carried for 24 years, David knew the future would be different. Finally, he was complete. 2 weeks had passed since the first family dinner, and David had become a regular presence in the Jordans' lives. He showed up for Sunday dinners, played with the twins in the garden, and had even started playing basketball with Jeffrey and Marcus Jr. on weekends. But while the Jordan family embraced their new member with enthusiasm, the outside world remained unaware of David's existence. And Michael was determined to keep it that way until David felt comfortable with eventual public exposure. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. David was in his office at the investment firm, analyzing quarterly reports, when his phone rang. The number was unknown, but something made him answer. David Rodriguez? Yes? This is Marcus Thompson from The Athletic. I'd like to ask some questions about your relationship with Michael Jordan. David's blood ran cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Mr. Rodriguez, we have photos of you entering and leaving Michael Jordan's house several times in the last 2 weeks. We also have information about a meeting at Gibson's last week with you, Michael, and a woman identified as Carmen Rodriguez. David sat down, his mind racing. No comment, Mr. Rodriguez. We're going to publish the story anyway. It would be better for everyone if we could include your version. I said no comment. David repeated, and hung up. He immediately called Michael. Dad, he said when Michael answered, we have a problem. Michael was in a meeting at Jordan Brand headquarters when he received David's call. The urgent tone in his son's voice set off all alarms in his head. What happened? A reporter called me. Marcus Thompson from The Athletic. He knows about me. About us. He has photos. Michael closed his eyes. He knew this moment would come, but hoped to have more time. Where are you? At work. Michael, I'm not ready for this. I don't want my life to become a circus. It won't become one. I'll take care of this. How? Do you trust me? David hesitated for just a moment. Yes, then leave work now. Go home and wait for me. I'll send security for you. And David? Yes? Everything's going to be okay. I promise. Michael immediately called his publicist, his legal team, and his security team. Within 2 hours, he had a plan in place. Carmen was in a board meeting when her assistant interrupted with an urgent note. Reporters are calling asking about David and Michael Jordan. Carmen excused herself from the board and ran to her office, where she found 5 voicemail messages from different media outlets. Her first call was to David, who answered immediately. Mom, did you hear? I heard. Where are you? At home. Michael sent security here. Mom, I don't want this. I don't want my private life to become public entertainment. Carmen understood perfectly. For years, she had protected David from exactly this exposure. Son, maybe it's time to take control of the narrative. What do you mean? Instead of letting reporters tell their story, you tell yours. That night, the Jordan family gathered in Highland Park for an emergency meeting. David was visibly tense. Michael was in problem-solving mode. And Yvette tried to keep everyone calm. What's the exact situation? Asked Jeffrey, always the most practical. Michael consulted his notes. Marcus Thompson has photos of David entering and leaving here. He has photos of lunch at Gibson's. And apparently, someone confirmed that David is my son. Who would confirm that? Asked Marcus Jr. Good question. David, did you tell anyone? Only my best friend Jake. But he would never tell. Carmen, who had arrived a few minutes earlier, cleared her throat. It might have been someone from the bank. The day we met, there was quite a commotion. People heard part of the conversation. Michael nodded. Probably. The important thing now is to decide how to handle it. What are the options? Asked David. Michael looked at his advisory team, who had joined the meeting via video call. Option 1. We deny everything and sue for defamation. Hard to maintain long-term, but could give us time. Option 2? Asked Jasmine. We confirm, but don't give details. Simple statement. No interviews. And option 3? Michael looked at David. We take control of the narrative. We give an exclusive interview to a reputable outlet. Tell the story our way. Creating. To CS. Quote. David was silent for a long moment. Everyone waited. If we do option 3, he said finally, can I include some conditions? Well, what conditions? First, nothing about my mother being irresponsible or having hidden information. The narrative is that it was unfortunate circumstances, not blame. Carmen looked at him gratefully. Second, I make it clear that I don't want anything financially. I don't want people to think I showed up looking for money. Third, I emphasize that I'm building my own professional path, not living off my father's fame. Michael nodded approvingly. These are smart conditions. And honestly, they're conditions that make me proud of you. So, we do option 3? If you're comfortable with it. David looked around the room. At Michael, Carmen, Yvette, his siblings. This family welcomed me unconditionally. If facing the press is the price to protect you and our privacy in the future, then that's what we'll do. Michael smiled. Definitely, my son. 3 days later, David and Michael were sitting in the ESPN studio, preparing for an exclusive interview with Scott Van Pelt. It was a strategic choice. Van Pelt was respected, trustworthy, and known for treating personal matters with sensitivity. Nervous? Asked Michael. Terrified, admitted David. It's different from business meetings. This is going to the whole world. Remember, be honest, be yourself, and if something gets uncomfortable, give me a signal. The interview began with Scott Van Pelt, establishing context, the rumors, the photos, media speculation. Then he turned to Michael. Michael, is it true that you have a 24-year-old son you only recently met? It's true, replied Michael calmly. This is my son, David. David, what's it like to discover your father is Michael Jordan? David breathed deeply, remembering Michael's advice. It's surreal and wonderful at the same time. I grew up knowing Michael Jordan was my father, but also knowing he didn't know about me. Meeting him personally, discovering we're similar in ways that go far beyond physical appearance. It was like finding a part of me that was always missing. Michael, how did you react when you found out? Initial shock, then overwhelming joy, followed by deep sadness for the lost years. David is an exceptional young man, and I deeply regret not being present in his life. Why didn't you know before? Michael and David had rehearsed this answer. It was unfortunate circumstances. David's mother tried to inform me when he was born, but the message never reached me due to problems with my team at the time. There was no bad intention on either side, just miscommunication that cost 24 years. Van Pelt turned to David. How was it growing up without knowing your father? Difficult sometimes, David admitted. But my mother did an incredible job raising me. I never felt without love or support. And she was always honest about who my father was. So I grew up admiring Michael Jordan, not just as a player, but as the man my mother describes. And now. David smiled genuinely. It's natural, in a way that surprises me. Obviously, we're still getting to know each other, but there's an immediate connection, and his family welcomed me completely. Yvette, his daughters, my brothers. Everyone treated me like family from day one. Michael, David looks a lot like you when you were young. What other similarities have you noticed? Michael laughed. Many. The competitiveness, attention to detail, even the way he eats. But David also has qualities I didn't have at his age, a maturity, a humility that impresses me. David, is there pressure in being Michael Jordan's son? There always was. Even when he didn't know about me. But now, ironically, there's less pressure. Because now I know he accepts me for who I am, not for who he'd like me to be. The interview continued for 30 more minutes, covering David's future plans, continue in finance, His hobbies: recreational basketball, reading, investments, and how the family was dealing with the situation. When it ended, David felt drained but relieved. "How did I do?" he asked Michael. "Perfectly. You were authentic, intelligent, and dignified. Exactly what I'd expect from my son." The reaction to the interview was overwhelmingly positive. The reunion story touched the public, and the obvious sincerity of both Michael and David won over even the skeptics. Online comments were mostly supportive, with many praising David for his maturity and Michael for his honesty. More importantly, the strategy worked. By controlling the narrative from the beginning, they avoided weeks of speculation, paparazzi photos, and sensationalist stories. A week after the interview, David was back to his normal work routine, with the difference that now colleagues greeted him in the hallways and some asked for occasional selfies. His phone rang during lunch. It was Michael. "How are you handling the attention?" asked his father. "Better than I expected. Most people have been respectful." "Good, David. I wanted to invite you to something." "What?" "Scotty's retirement game on Friday. It would be the first public appearance as father and son. Would you be up for it?" David paused. It was another level of exposure, but also an opportunity to stand beside his father in a significant moment. "I'd love to," he replied. "Great." "And David?" "Yes? Thank you for handling all this with such class. You make me proud." After hanging up, David looked out his office window, seeing Chicago stretch into the distance. 2 weeks ago, he was David Rodriguez, investment analyst. Now he was David Rodriguez Jordan, son of Michael Jordan. His life had changed completely, but in all the right ways. He finally had the family he'd always wanted, the father he'd always dreamed of knowing, and a future that stretched before him full of possibilities. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly complete. The United Center buzzed with special energy on the night of Scottie Pippen's retirement ceremony. It was David and Michael's first public appearance as father and son since the ESPN interview, and camera flashes intensified when they arrived together. David, wearing a dark gray suit that Yvette had helped choose, walked beside Michael with a confidence that had been built over the past 3 weeks. The presence of the complete Jordan family, Yvette, the twins, Jeffrey, Marcus Jr., and Jasmine, created a protective shield around him. "How are you feeling?" asked Michael as they entered the arena. "Like I'm in one of your NBA finals," replied David, provoking laughter from his siblings. "Definitely a Jordan," commented Jasmine. The ceremony was moving. Scottie Pippen, visibly touched, spoke about the glory years of the Bulls, about his partnership with Michael, about what it meant to play for Chicago. When he mentioned the importance of family and loyalty, Michael instinctively placed his hand on David's shoulder. During halftime, they were approached by several of Michael's former teammates. Dennis Rodman, characteristically theatrical, hugged David and shouted, "Another Jordan! The world wasn't ready." Steve Kerr was more subtle. "The resemblance is impressive. Do you play basketball?" "A little," replied David modestly. "A little," repeated Jeffrey. "He destroyed me one-on-one last week." "Inherited Dad's competitiveness, apparently," observed Kerr. Later that night, when the family returned to Highland Park, they gathered in the living room for a conversation Michael had been postponing for weeks. "David," said Michael, serving whiskey to his older sons, "there's something I need to tell you. About the years you lost. About what my life was like when you were born." David straightened up, realizing this was something important. "What do you mean?" Michael breathed deeply. "When you were born, in 1999, I was not the person I am today. I was arrogant, obsessed with my career, and treated relationships as something secondary. Dad," David began, but Michael raised his hand. "Let me finish. If I had known about you then, if Carmen had managed to tell me, honestly, I don't know if I would have been a good father." The silence in the room was absolute. "I was so focused on being the best player, on winning championships, on maintaining my public image, that I didn't have emotional space for anything else. Juanita can confirm this. Our marriage suffered because I was incapable of balancing family and career. David processed the words carefully. Are you saying it might have been better for me not to have grown up with you? I'm saying the man you met 3 weeks ago is different from the man I was at 36. Time, experiences, mistakes, all of this shaped me into the father I am today. Jeffrey spoke for the first time. Dad, you were never a bad father. Intense, yes. Demanding, absolutely. But you were always present for important moments. But I could have been more present, Michael insisted. And if David had grown up with me in the 90s and early 2000s, he would have received an incomplete version of me. David was silent for a long moment. Dad, can I say something? Of course. My mother always told me stories about you, not about Michael Jordan, the player, but about Michael Jordan, the man. She talked about your generosity when no one was looking, about your intelligence, about how you made her laugh. That made me admire you long before I knew how good you were at basketball. David paused, collecting his thoughts. If I had grown up with you in the 90s, maybe I would have known a different father. But I also would have grown up in a different situation. Maybe I'd be spoiled, or arrogant, or live in your shadow. Maybe I wouldn't have developed the independence and determination I did. He looked directly at Michael. I can't miss something I never had. And the man you are today, this father, this grandfather, this husband, is exactly the father I'd like to have had. Yvette discreetly wiped away a tear. Besides, continued David with a half-smile, my mother raised me well. I think she did a decent job preparing me for this moment. Michael laughed, the tension in the room dissolving. She did more than a decent job. She did an extraordinary job. So stop blaming yourself, said David firmly. The past is the past. We have a future to build. The next morning, Carmen called David early. I saw the photos from the event yesterday. You looked like a real family. We are a real family, Mom. How was it? David told her about the previous night's conversation. About Michael's reflections. About how the family had come together even more. He's a different man now, said Carmen. More mature. More complete. You were lucky to meet him at this moment in his life. Mom. Of course. Do you still love him? Carmen was silent for so long that David thought the call had dropped. Mom? Yes, she said finally. Part of me always loved him. But Michael is happy now. Has a beautiful family. And I'm at peace with the choices I made. Really? Or do you regret not fighting for you too? David. Some loves aren't meant to last. They're meant to teach us. To change us. To give us precious gifts. Her voice became softer. Michael gave me you. That's worth a lifetime of what-ifs. 2 weeks later, David was playing basketball with Jeffrey and Marcus Jr. on the private court at Michael's house when he noticed he had observers. Michael was on the terrace, watching discreetly. Does Dad want to play? Shouted David. My knee can't handle it anymore, Michael shouted back. Liar, replied Marcus Jr. You played with me last week. Michael came down to the court, wearing shorts and a vintage Chicago Bulls t-shirt. At 62, he still maintained good physical shape, but it was obvious he no longer had the explosiveness of old. Okay, he said. But no physical contact. I'm an old man. What followed was one of the most surreal experiences of David's life. He was playing basketball with Michael Jordan, not just as a fan, but as a son. Michael still had all the fundamentals, court vision, ability to read the game. But now, he used experience more than athleticism. David, shouted Michael during a play. You're too predictable. Vary the attack. Dad, I'm 24 years old. Of course I'm going to the rim every time, and that's why I'm going to steal the ball from you every time. And he did, 3 times in a row. Jeffrey and Marcus Jr. looked at each other, smiling. It was the first time they'd seen Michael really compete since David had entered the family. "He brought back the competitor in Dad," murmured Marcus Jr. At the end of the session, everyone was sweaty and laughing. Michael put his arm around his three sons. "You know," he said, "this is one of the best days I've ever had." "Really?" asked David. "Really. Throughout my career, I dreamed of playing with my sons. Jeffrey and Marcus Jr. were never seriously interested in the sport. But now," he squeezed David's shoulder, "now I have a son who not only plays, but understands the game the way I understand it." David felt an intense emotion rising in his throat. "Dad, this means more to me than you can imagine." That night, during family dinner, Victoria made an observation that surprised everyone. "David," she said. "How so, sweetheart?" asked Yvette. "He smiles more now, and laughs more. It's like something that was missing came back." Isabel agreed. "It's true. Dad was happy before, but now he's complete." Michael looked at the full table. Yvette, the twins, Jeffrey with his girlfriend, Marcus Jr., Jasmine, and David. "You know," he said, "the girls are right. I didn't know something was missing until David appeared." David looked around the table, at these people who had become his family in less than 2 months. "I felt the same," he said. "My whole life I felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was." Carmen arrived at that moment. She had been invited for dessert, something that had become a weekly tradition. "Sorry I'm late," she said, taking off her coat. "Terrible traffic." Michael stood up to greet her, as he always did, but this time, the greeting lasted a little longer. And David noticed something in both their eyes. A familiarity. An old intimacy that had never completely disappeared. "Carmen," said Yvette warmly, "you arrived at the perfect time. We were talking about how the family feels complete now." Carmen smiled, but David noticed a shadow of melancholy in her eyes. "It's wonderful to see you all together," she said. Later, when dessert had been served and conversations divided into small groups, David watched his parents talking discreetly in the corner of the room. There was a chemistry between them that was impossible to ignore. He approached Yvette, who was also watching them. "Is this weird?" asked David. "What's weird?" "The situation between my father and my mother." Yvette considered the question carefully. "David, Michael, and I built our relationship knowing about his past. We all have people we loved at different times in our lives. That doesn't diminish what we have now. But don't you feel threatened?" Yvette laughed softly. "Dear, look around this table. This is the family Michael and I built together. Carmen is my stepson's mother. That makes her part of our family too." David nodded, admiring Yvette's maturity. "You're incredible. And you're officially a Jordan now, because only a Jordan would ask such a direct question." They laughed together, and David realized his new family was more complex and more loving than anything he could have imagined. At the end of the night, when everyone was preparing to leave, Michael asked for a moment alone with David. "Son," he said, "there's something I want to give you." He left the room and returned with a small velvet box. "This belonged to my father, James. My grandfather gave it to him when he got married. My father gave it to me when I got married for the first time. And now," he opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with the initials JRJ engraved. David looked at the ring, then at Michael. "Why not? This is a family heirloom. It should go to Jeffrey, or Marcus Jr." Michael shook his head. "David, they already have their inheritances. You lost 24 years of family traditions. This is my way of saying you were always part of this family, even when we didn't know." David accepted the ring with trembling hands. "What do the initials mean?" 5. "What?" 5. "James Robert Jordan, my father, your grandfather." David put on the ring, and it fit perfectly. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for giving me the chance to be your father." They hugged, and David knew he had finally found his place in the world. Not just as David Rodriguez, not just as Carmen's son, but as David Rodriguez Jordan, a full member of the Jordan family, with all the privileges, responsibilities, and love that implied. 6 months had passed since that first encounter at the bank, and life had found a new and comfortable rhythm. David had moved to a larger apartment in Lincoln Park, more suitable for regularly hosting family. Carmen had accepted a promotion that freed her from some responsibilities, allowing more time with the extended family. And Michael had discovered that being father to an adult son was different, but no less rewarding than raising children. It was a Saturday morning when Carmen called Michael with an unexpected proposal. "Michael, do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course. What's going on?" "I'm thinking about moving." Michael almost dropped his coffee. "Where to?" "Seattle. I received an offer to be regional vice president for one of the country's largest banks." The silence stretched between them. "Is it a good offer?" "It's an incredible offer. But," she hesitated, "it means leaving Chicago, leaving David, leaving all this." "Carmen, you can't make a decision like that based on us. This is your career, your life. It's not just about you. It's about finally having the courage to start something new, instead of staying trapped in what could have been." Michael understood immediately. "Are you running away?" "I'm freeing myself." They met that afternoon at the same cafe where they had lunched for the first time decades ago. Carmen was different, more determined, but also more vulnerable. "When do you need to decide?" asked Michael. 2 weeks. "And does David know?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Michael studied her face. The face that still made him remember how he felt at 35. "Carmen, can I be brutally honest? You always were. Are you running away because being close to me is difficult? Or because you finally feel free to move forward?" Carmen looked at her hands. "Both." "Explain." "Michael, spending these 6 months seeing you as a father, as a husband, as the person you became, has been beautiful and torturous at the same time." "Why?" "Because it makes me think about what we could have been if I had been brave enough to fight for us 25 years ago." "Carmen, let me finish." "But it also makes me realize that you're happy, truly happy, with Yvette, with your family, with your life. And I need to find my own happiness, not live in the shadow of what we lost." "And you think you can't find that happiness here?" "I think that as long as I'm here, part of me will always be waiting for something to change. And that's not fair to me, to you, or to Yvette." Michael nodded slowly. "I understand." "Really? Really. But I'll miss you." "David will miss you." Carmen smiled, tears beginning to form. "I won't disappear. Seattle is just a flight away, and David is an adult man. He can visit me, or I can come back for holidays. Is this what you want?" "Really?" Carmen was silent for a long moment. "I want the chance to discover who I am when I'm not defined by our history. For 25 years, I've been the woman who loved Michael Jordan. I want to discover who Carmen Rodriguez is when she's not in anyone's shadow." David reacted better than Carmen expected. "Mom, this is an incredible opportunity," he said when she told him about the proposal. "Why do you seem guilty?" "Because it means leaving you." "Mom, I'm 24 years old. I can take care of myself. Besides," he smiled, "now I have a whole family here to keep me in line. Are you sure you don't mind?" David hugged her. "Mom, you sacrificed 24 years of your life to raise me. It's time for you to live for yourself. We can't for long. I'll know. What if I miss you? Then you get on a plane and come back to visit, or we'll visit you." Carmen looked at her son, this young man who had become so wise, so mature. "How did you get so smart?" "No. Good genes," said David, winking. The farewell party was organized at Michael and Yvette's house. The entire Jordan family was present, along with some of Carmen's close friends. It was bittersweet. Everyone understood she was doing the right thing. But that didn't make the goodbye less difficult. During the party, Michael found Carmen alone in the garden, looking at the lake. "Regrets?" he asked. "No. And you?" Michael considered the question. "About you moving?" "No. About the past?" "Always." "Michael." "Carmen. There's something I never told you. About why I accepted so easily when you said you needed space." Carmen turned to look at him. "I was scared," continued Michael. "Scared of how much I loved you. Scared of what that meant for my career, for my focus. So when you said you needed space, part of me was relieved." "Why?" "Because it meant I didn't have to choose between you and basketball. And at that time, I didn't know if I would choose you." Carmen felt tears burning her eyes. "And now? If you had to choose now?" Michael looked toward the house, where he could see Yvette playing with the twins, David talking with Jeffrey and Marcus Jr., Jasmine organizing dessert. "Now I know it would never have been a choice between you and basketball. It would have been a choice between who I was and who I could become. And I became someone better for having known you, for having lost you, for having found you again, for having discovered our son." End quote. Carmen smiled through tears. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the family through the window. "Michael," said Carmen finally, "thank you." "For what?" "For giving me the greatest gift of my life, for creating a family that welcomed our son, for becoming the man David deserved as a father. Carmen, thank you. For raising our son alone, for making difficult decisions, for giving us the chance to be family, even if late." They hugged, a long hug that was at the same time goodbye and thank you. "Take care of him," whispered Carmen. "Like he was my own life," replied Michael. A week later, Carmen was at O'Hare Airport, with David, Michael, and surprisingly, Yvette and the twins there to say goodbye. "We'll miss you," said Victoria. "A lot," added Isabel. "And will you visit me in Seattle?" "Of course," said both in unison. Yvette hugged Carmen warmly. "Thank you for sharing your family with us," she said. "Thank you for welcoming our son," replied Carmen. Finally, it was time to board. David hugged his mother one last time. "I love you, Mom. I love you, son. Take care of yourself. And take care of this family. They're special." "They are," agreed David. "And now they're my family too." Michael was the last to say goodbye. "Carmen, I know," she interrupted. "Take care of him. And be happy. You too." Carmen walked toward the gate, stopping once to wave. Then she disappeared into the crowd of passengers, beginning a new chapter of her life. 3 months later, David was in Michael and Yvette's kitchen, helping prepare Sunday dinner, when his phone rang. "David, guess what?" It was Carmen, and she sounded happier than David had heard her in years. "What?" "I met someone." David almost dropped the pot he was holding. "Really? Tell me." "Everything. He's an economist, works for the state government. He's kind, intelligent, and," she paused, "he makes me laugh." "That's amazing, Mom." "And you? How are things there?" David looked around the kitchen. Michael teaching the twins how to make sauce, Yvette preparing salad, Jeffrey arriving with his new girlfriend, Marcus Jr., and Jasmine arguing about sports in the living room. "Good," he said. "Very good." "Really? Mom?" "For the first time in my life, I know exactly where I belong. I know." "And where is that?" David smiled, watching the family he had gained, the life he had built, the father he had found. "Home," he said. "Finally, I'm home." 2.5 years had passed since that fateful afternoon at the bank. It was December 2027, and Chicago was covered by a perfect snow that transformed the city into a postcard. The mansion in Highland Park was decorated for the end-of-year festivities, but this wasn't a common celebration. It was David Rodriguez, Jordan's wedding day. In his room, David adjusted his tie for the 5th time, clearly nervous. Michael entered, wearing an impeccable tuxedo, carrying 2 champagne glasses. Nervous? Asked Michael, offering one of the glasses. Terrified, admitted David. Is it strange? Getting married in my father's house? 2. It's perfect, said Michael. This house became the center of our family. It's right that it should be here. David smiled, looking out the window at the garden where chairs were being arranged. Dad? Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think she would have liked her? Your mother? My grandmother? Michael felt a familiar emotion rise in his throat. Dolores had passed away a year before, at 85. But not before knowing and falling in love with David. Son, my mother adored you, and she would have adored Sarah. Sarah Chen was a neurosurgeon, had met David at a conference on healthcare investments. She was brilliant, independent, and wasn't impressed at all by the fact that David was Michael Jordan's son. She challenges you? Michael had observed after meeting her. She's perfect. Sometimes it still seems surreal, said David. 3 years ago, I had no father, no siblings, no extended family. Now I'm getting married in my father's house, with my brothers as groomsmen. And how do you feel about that? David considered the question. Grateful. Incredibly grateful. A knock on the door interrupted the moment. It was Carmen, who had arrived from Seattle the morning before. Can I come in? She asked. Of course, Mom. Carmen entered, radiant in a navy blue dress. Behind her came a man, about 50 years old, tall and kind. David, Michael, this is Robert, said Carmen. My fiancé. David blinked. Fiancé? Carmen laughed. Surprise! Introductions were made quickly. Robert Morrison was the economist Carmen had met in Seattle. They had fallen in love slowly, building a relationship based on companionship and mutual respect. When? Asked David. He proposed last week, said Carmen. And before you ask, we're getting married in the summer, in a small ceremony. Michael shook Robert's hand. Welcome to the extended family, he said genuinely. Thank you, replied Robert. Carmen told me a lot about all of you. The ceremony was perfect. David and Sarah exchanged vows they had written themselves, in front of an intimate audience of family and close friends. Jeffrey, Marcus Jr., and now also Robert, stood as groomsmen. Jasmine was maid of honor, alongside Sarah's friends. Michael had the honor of walking Sarah down the aisle, since her parents were in China and couldn't travel. He whispered as he handed her over to David. He's my most precious gift. You can be sure of that, replied Sarah. During the vows, David spoke about family, not just about Sarah becoming his wife, but about how family can be found in the most unexpected moments. 3 years ago, he said, looking at Michael, I was a man who thought he was complete. I had a career, friends, a good life, but something fundamental was missing. I didn't know where I came from, who I really was. His words were directed at Sarah, but his eyes occasionally moved to Michael, Carmen, and the rest of the Jordan family. Sarah, you came into my life at the perfect time. When I had finally found my family, you showed me that family isn't just about blood or the past. It's about choosing to love someone every day, about building something new together. Sarah, in turn, spoke about how David had taught her that strength doesn't come from never having struggled, but from getting up after each fall. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the Jordan family exploded in applause. Victoria and Isabel, now 13, screamed louder than anyone. During the reception, Michael stood up to make a toast. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying emotion, I thought my family was complete. I had a wonderful wife, incredible children, a blessed life. He looked at David and Sarah. Then I discovered I had a son I didn't know. And that son taught me that family isn't about being complete. It's about being open. Open to growing, to changing, to loving in ways you never imagined. Michael raised his glass. David, you made me a better father, a better husband, a better man. Sarah, thank you for loving our son and for joining our family craziness. To family, he said, in the forms it takes and the surprises it brings. To family, echoed the entire room. Later that night, after most guests had left, Michael found David alone in the garden, looking at the stars. Thinking about what? Asked Michael. About how strange life is, said David. If my mother hadn't gone to the bank that day, if you hadn't shown up, if that employee hadn't been rude, none of this would have happened. Do you believe in destiny? I don't know. But I believe some people are meant to be in each other's lives, and life always finds a way to bring those people together. Michael put his arm around his son's shoulders. David, can I tell you a secret? Of course. During all the years of my career, all the victories, all the championships, all the records, nothing compares to the pride I feel for you. Not because you're my son, but because of the man you became. David felt tears burning his eyes. Dad, you grew up without me, but you grew up well. You became a man of integrity, intelligence, generosity. That has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with who you chose to be. It had a lot to do with you too. Maybe not in person, but my mother always told me about you. About your work ethic, your loyalty, your passion. Those stories shaped me as much as any physical presence could have. They stayed silent for a few minutes, father and son contemplating the unlikely path that had brought them to this moment. Dad, said David finally, thank you for not giving up when you discovered me, for fighting to know me. David, thank you for giving me the chance to be your father. Inside the house, the party continued in a quieter tone. Carmen and Robert talked with Yvette about wedding plans. Jeffrey, Marcus Jr., and Jasmine told Sarah embarrassing stories about David. The twins had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted by the day's excitement. Sarah watched Michael and David in the garden through the window. They're beautiful together, she commented. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, said Jasmine. Seeing my father discover this side of himself that he didn't even know existed. What do you mean? Asked Sarah. Dad was always a wonderful father to us. But with David, it's different. It's like he got a second chance to be a father, but with all the wisdom he didn't have when we were little. Carmen, listening to the conversation, smiled. Michael always had a lot of love to give, she said. He just needed to learn how to express it. And David? Asked Sarah. How has he changed? David was always a complete person, replied Carmen. But it was a forced completeness, you know? Like he had to be perfect, because he was proving something. Now he can just be himself. When the night finally ended, and the last guests had left, the family gathered in the living room for one last toast. David and Sarah had changed clothes and were about to leave for their honeymoon in Japan. Before you go, said Michael, I want to give something to you. He left the room and returned with an envelope. What's this? Asked David. Keys to a house in Lake Tahoe. Your extended honeymoon, if you want. David opened the envelope and found not just keys, but the deed to a house. It's not just for you. It's for all of us. A place where the Jordan family can gather, create memories. Where the next generations can learn about family. Sarah looked at David, then at Michael. It's too generous. Sarah, said Yvette, you're a Jordan now. You'll discover that excessive generosity is a family problem. Everyone laughed. Besides, added Michael, I want my future grandchildren to have a place where they can run free and know the whole family. Future grandchildren? Asked David. No pressure, said Michael quickly, provoking more laughter. 3 hours later, David and Sarah were in their apartment, packing final bags for the morning flight. How do you feel? Asked Sarah. Complete, said David without hesitation. For the first time in my life, I feel truly complete. Even with all the craziness, the media attention, the expectations, the pressure of being Michael Jordan's son, David paused in the packing. Sarah, you met my father today. You saw how he is with family, how he loves. All that craziness, all that attention. It's worth it to have this. And your mother? I'm happy for her. She deserves to be loved for who she is, not for who she was in the past. Sarah approached and hugged her husband. And us? What do you want for us? I want us to build our own version of family. I want our children to grow up knowing their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts. I want them to have what I didn't have, but also what I did have. A mother who loves them unconditionally, and the strength to create their own path. 5 years later. It was December 2032, and the house in Lake Tahoe was full for the end-of-year festivities. Michael, now 69 and officially grandfather of 5 grandchildren, was in the kitchen preparing breakfast with the help of his youngest grandson, David Jr., son of David and Sarah, 2 years old. Grandpa Mike, said the boy, trying to pronounce the name correctly. Pancake. Yes, we're going to make pancakes for everyone, replied Michael, lifting his grandson so he could help stir the batter. The house was full. Carmen and Robert had arrived the night before from Seattle. Jeffrey was there with his wife and children. Marcus Jr. with his new girlfriend. Jasmine with her husband and daughter. Victoria and Isabel, now 18 and in college, had brought friends. Yvette organized presents under the Christmas tree. And David was on the deck, watching the lake and talking on the phone with a client. Even on vacation, some aspects of his Type A personality never changed. David, shouted Sarah from inside the house. Your call can wait. Your son wants to show you the snowman he made. David looked through the window and saw David Jr. gesticulating animatedly at him next to Michael. He immediately hung up the phone. Dad, shouted the boy when David entered. Look what I made with Grandpa Mike. Wow, said David, pretending to be impressed with the small pile of snow that vaguely resembled a snowman. It's incredible. Michael watched the interaction between David and his son, smiling. He has your personality, he commented. God help us, replied David, lifting David Jr. Come here, champ. Let's see if we can make a better snowman. As they went out to the garden, Michael felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Carmen. Penny, for your thoughts? She said. I was thinking about how everything has changed, replied Michael. 5 years ago, I didn't know David existed. Now I can't imagine life without him. Carmen nodded. And look what else has changed. I'm happy. You're happy. David is building his own beautiful family. Sometimes it still seems surreal. The best things in life usually do. They watched through the window, David playing with his son in the snow, Yvette organizing presents, Michael's other children arriving for breakfast. Michael, said Carmen, thank you. For what? For forgiving me for the lost years. For welcoming Robert into the family. For creating a place where our son, and now our grandson, can grow up surrounded by so much love. Michael looked at Carmen, the woman he had loved, lost, found again, and who was now a permanent part of his extended family. Carmen, thank you for raising the extraordinary man David became. We did it together, she said. It just took a little longer than we expected. From outside, David Jr. screamed with joy when he managed to put a stone as the snowman's nose. David picked him up and spun him around, both laughing. Grandpa Mike, Grandma Carmen, come see, shouted David Jr. Michael and Carmen looked at each other and smiled. Let's go, said Michael. Our family is calling. They went out into the snow, joining 3 generations of the Jordan family who had found each other through the most unlikely paths possible. And as he watched his son play with his grandson, surrounded by the family that had grown in ways he never could have imagined, Michael knew that some of life's best blessings arrive when we least expect them. And that family, true family, isn't about blood or time. It's about love, forgiveness, and the courage to embrace second chances. In the end, the story that began with a rude employee at a bank had become the story of how love finds a way, how family expands when we open our hearts, and how it's never too late to start over. Michael Jordan had won 6 NBA championships, but his greatest victory had come at 62, when he discovered he was a father for the 6th time. And this victory, unlike the others, would be forever.